Hello and welcome to another AGK tutorial. This is part 2 of the first person tutorial, or the first person shooter tutorial if you want to call it that, but there's no shooting involved at the moment. I haven't got any shooting, and in this one we're making a little cityscape to walk around in, because in the last episode it was just a grass floor. So I've just run this and click, so it stops spinning round. It's started doing that for some reason when the mouse isn't actually on the screen, and you can see, although it's not exactly the prettiest thing, we've got sort of a semi-city going. I can walk around it, all randomly generated, so we've got random colours, random shades of grey basically, random box sizes, random positioning. It also scales to whatever size of world you want to make, but obviously you can only go so big. I mean, that's running at what, 42 frames per second there, but it's because I'm recording. It goes at 60 now, problem when it's not recording. And there's 409 buildings around this area, but it also runs slightly slow when it's not textured, I believe. But saying that, it is mostly the recording that's causing it not to run super smooth, but we'll get out of that. Right, now it's pretty much the same as it was before. You can see I've got a set generate Midmaps in here. That generates Midmaps for the objects and the images, more importantly for the objects, when you load them in. So all these images here, excuse me, all these images here will be loaded up and be generated Midmaps for. I'm not using these images at the moment, so let's just first of all, we had grass in the last one, let's put the floor in. So that's just a little, it's not grass, but you can see it's a floor. It's crap because it's so stretched, but that's something we can come to later, I think. Depends how far I go with it. You see we're still running the same sort of frames per second. Right, okay, now before I go any further than that, I'll just show you the changes I've made so far. You got a little variable here called ground size. That allows you to change the actual size of the ground, which is created here. So instead of making it with the set size as I did before, changed it to ground size, and you can alter this as you want. I mean, we'll go mad. We'll go 496. Don't know how this will run, but that will automatically generate a bigger ground, and it'll automatically generate the actual city to fill it. You can see I've got a big space I'm in here. I mean, I may be in a building, it is possible, but no, I'm not. And that's because, you know, it's a lot bigger area now. It's a huge area, and you've got more buildings. You can see it's generated more buildings because it has to fill the area up, but it's only a certain percentage it covers, and as you get smaller it gets a lot thicker, because obviously these buildings, I haven't set the scales to be altered. The buildings are always this big no matter how big your city is. I didn't change the building scales to go down. So the percentage it covers when it's smaller is a hell of a lot bigger with the buildings than when it's bigger, if you can understand my meaning. But yeah, we're still running okay. I'll leave it at that for now. So that's what ground does, or ground size. That's all the same as normal. That's the same as normal. I've made a skybox, very basic skybox indeed. So I've loaded an image up called sky. I've created a box 4 times the size of ground size in each direction, so it's a lot bigger than the actual scene itself. Go away, I don't want you. Then I'm setting the object cool mode to 0 so you can see through from inside. Normally if you're inside an object and it's standard, you won't see it. It'll just look like it's invisible, but because I've set it to 0 there, that will let you see the textures and see the sides of the actual box. Set obviously the sky image to it, and I've set it so it's not affected by light, because if you have it affected by light, if I do that and run it, you'll see the sides clearly. Oh, well, you should see the sides clearly, perhaps not. My skybox is actually quite good even without that now. But normally, yeah, you would see it. I'm surprised that hasn't actually altered a lot more than that, but that's just down to my actual image. I think with normal images it looked terrible unless you set that to 0. Oops. Click. Unless you set that to 0, the light would be affecting it and you could see sort of shadows on one side of the wall. But obviously with that texture, for some reason it's not making any difference. But it's just a tip, and obviously the cool mode you'll need to use for cubes. Really, you probably use planes. You probably make planes and position them yourself to get a really good sky mode, so you can have different skies for the left, right, up, down. Well, not down. You're not going to really see the down bits, but you know what I mean. It gives you more control. But this is just one texture stretched across the entire thing. But I've designed the texture so it'll work. Density, that's how many buildings there are. So that's 20%. 0.2 is 20%. So if I wanted more buildings, so we'll go to 40% and run it now, you'll see that, yeah, we've got a lot more buildings. They're obviously a bit more encroached, and you know, it's 1,638 buildings there now. That's a few more. We're getting a bit more crazy city size, and you can see you can strafe. And you can also run in this, put a little run in. I could probably do with increasing that, but it's easy to tell when you're playing it. Right. Like I said, that's what the density does, and the beauty of doing it like this is you can change it on the fly. I mean, let's have 90% density. Now this is going to be useless because I'm going to be stuck in buildings and all sorts. You can guarantee it. They're going to be overlaying each other. Oops. It's trouble not having it full screen. Oh, perhaps not. Yeah, you can see it's glitching there because they're sort of too close together and they've got bugs. But you know, even at 90%, 3,686 buildings. Yeah, that's pretty dense. Oh, here we go. Look, you're just getting absolutely huge expanses of them. So, but you can see it works, and it's still, although it's dropped down to 25 frames per second now, it's not too bad. And let's face it, that's a lot of buildings. You never want to really have that many at once. But that's just to show you it all works, and it makes it nice and easy for you to just play around with it how you want. We'll leave it to 30% for now. Right, now, have I missed anything in here? The Skybox I've shown you. That's just loading all the images for the buildings, which we haven't used yet, and I'm dimensioning a separate array for that, just to keep it nice and modular from the last part. You know, I quite regularly will use one array and put everything into it, but it just makes it easier for you to follow and add things in. So you make an array of 10, so it's called building IM, or whatever you want to call it, and then I'm setting those to load all these different images in. That's for the buildings. Build count, that's how many buildings it's going to make. So that when it tells you how many buildings it's made, that's worked out by the ground size times the density and floor in it, so it's not a strange number. And then that's how many buildings it'll do. So then it goes through build count here, after you've dimensionalized building and building info. Building info isn't so important at the second. You could leave that and leave all of these things out. This is for collision. Again, I've done it in a separate array rather than all one array, just to make it easier to look at the old program and go, oh right, now this is extra stuff. So it goes for 1 to build count, and can I get the entire loop in? Not quite. You can see I've rammed some out there, but this is basically setting the building width to a random size. Then it's saving that into a building info. This is more for the collision, but you know, I've just left it in for now. I'm not showing you the collision in this one. That'll be for another part. I'm not 100% with it yet. It works perfectly. It's smooth and it's fast, and it'll probably do. It's maths based. It's old style now from Dart Basic. This was originally done in, as far as I remember. Obviously, it's probably been done before by many people, but when I first used it, it was Dart Basic, the original Dart Basic Classic, if you want to call it that. So yeah, you go through here and you're storing these random heights. You're setting all the building height, depth and width to random sizes, so you can have random buildings. Obviously this range here is so it's minimum of 20 width, a maximum of 40. Same with that, minimum of 20, maximum of 120 for the height. It goes through all that. Building colour, again, that's just one random, and then basically in the pot where it sets the colour, it uses that just on one thing to give a shade of grey. But that'll be a bit further down here. And then it makes the building with all these things set ready, which is lovely. And obviously that's all ready. The only reason I use the arrays for collision, this bit here, I mean it's doubling up on what it needs to do. I could get rid of some of that and just use the array, to be honest, but as I did one first and then added the next in, that's how it's gone. So like I say, you don't have to do it all like that, but basically I've just left it. So that makes that. It sets the object position at a random position. The random sign gives you either a negative or a positive, so basically it'll either go to the negative or the positive. If you think about it, literally, so it starts from the centre, 0 is the centre, and then it can either go left or right, you know, or up or down, depending on the coordinates here. And it's a random of ground size divided by 2, because that's half of it, because it starts in the middle. And the same for this side. I think I've explained that. Okay, so you think you're starting in the middle, your ground size is whatever it is, and you have to divide that by 2 because you're at the centre and you want to work out how much across each way it is from the centre. Simple as that. Now this part that I've took out is basically the images, so let's put it in. Let me run that. And there we have it. A city. Not brilliant, not fantastic. But, you know, a city. And you can see it looks a little blurry. This bit here looks a little bit blurry. Can't point because I've got no mouse cursor. The side of that building looks a bit naff. And that's because of midmapping. So you can decide whether to use it or not. On a phone, if you try this on a phone, they can't walk around because it hasn't got the keys. You can spin around the screen and look at the scene. And with midmapping, it doesn't look too bad. You can't really tell, and it runs faster, so it's definitely worth using. But on a PC, if you've got a fast PC, you might be as well to take it off. Until like, I don't know, there's got to be a better way of generating bitmaps than that. They're just too blurry from the side, in my opinion. But it is something that I've always noticed when you use bitmaps. It does tend to make side edges look a bit horrible. Horrible. There's got to be better ways of doing it. That's for certain. What's that? Without bitmaps, well, because I'm mad at the start because of the mouse being off. And you can see it's a lot sharper, a lot less blurry. It's a little bit glitchy, a little bit flickery, that's what the mapping stops. But at least the sides of the buildings don't look like they're covered in Vaseline. That's my main gripe with that. Yeah, and as you can see, actually we have collision. Yay, we do have collision. Walking around our little Grand Theft Auto city. Look at this. Yeah, considering this is randomly generated, you can see there's all different images on all the buildings. I've done that just with basically the height of the building, and that determines what texture it can be, so you can get a bit of variation just automatically with some nice random code. Of course, with this as well, the buildings can blob together. I've got nothing stopping. Is this one blobbed? It looks like. No, it's not quite. It's got a hole. But that can stick together. That can cause really messy effects. So it's something you'd have to look at if you was trying to do it like that. But obviously the advantage of that is you don't just get these single solitary blocks that look okay. But you know, but some buildings, is this one doing it, or is it? Oh, no, there's a gap there. It's just not. I've not got enough buildings on. Sometimes they clump together, and you know, obviously that makes it look like it's a slightly different shaped building, and it works quite well. I mean, this one could have clumped together, but it hasn't. Typically, normally there's quite a few, but you know, it's random. I can't find any anyway. I'm digressing. Let's get back to the code. Right, so we'll leave that Midmaps off for now. Right, that's where I remedied it out. Right, I've told you what all that means. You can see I'm positioning it. This basically checks the height. So it's greater than 0, which it's always going to be greater than 0. It basically sets the image to whatever image number I want, which in this case is 2. I played around with different things and had to mess around, so it's all over the place. Normally it'd be nice and neat, but you know, I was just changing the building image, thinking now that's better on a smaller building and that sort of thing. And then if it's greater than 16.5, the building was greater than 16, sets it to that texture, and so on and so on and so on. So 70s the tall buildings, 50s sort of pretty tall building, 35, so on and so on. And that it's a good way of doing it. You could use all sorts of flags there and do quite complicated cities quite simply. You don't just have height, you can use the width and the depth, and just think what sort of textures would fit. Or you could even have, you know, I mean with this I'm just loading up boxes and texturing them, which, you know, it's efficient in the fact that there's not many polygons, but if you wanted to do a really good game you'd probably want actual buildings. And you could sort of, if you could design the buildings modularly, you could sort of do a similar system with objects you load up. And you know, that's the sort of idea. You've got to think of what you want to use as the identifying feature of the building, and then you can just sort of play around, changing the textures, changing parts of the building if you was going to load lots of different parts up. But that obviously gets complicated. But as it is, that works quite nicely for a little prototype. This looks quite good. And right, so at the end, that's the end of the loop for that. That's what it's doing for build count, which is however many buildings there are. Obviously it sets the colour there, like I said. It's a building colour, building colour, building colour, and building N. So yeah, so that's changing it. Oh right, yeah, of course. So it sets it to grey. So whatever you set building colour to be, which is the random thing up here, where have I got it? I can't find it. Oh, it's here, isn't it? Building colour random 80,230. So basically it's one of those, and then it puts them all the same. That makes it grey. Yeah. Just remembering myself there what I'm doing, and that's obviously the transparency there. Like I say, speed hash is the speed you can run at. It hides the mouse. There's the command I couldn't think of last time. Set raw mouse visible. And I'm setting the camera range to ground size times 4, so you can actually see everywhere all the time. Ignore that. That's sort of that's to do with the collision that I'm not using, sticky collision, and like I say, I was playing around with it. These are the same commands as before, just running about. I've got this little bit in here, collision, but I'm not going to show you that, so that's not relevant at the moment, but that it's in and it's running. You could see it was working. And then in this, if you get raw straight key state equals 16, that's the shift key, left shift. So basically that's for the run. It increases the speed if you press that down, and if not, it sets it back to normal. So that lets you to run. That's different to before. That's still to exit. Yep, none of that's changed. It's all the same. It's all the same. Yeah, and that's collision, but we're not going into collision. So yeah, that's it. You can see that it runs pretty well, apart from that stupid thing that suddenly started happening. Not quite certain why. Well, I know why. It's because my mouse is off the screen and it's going to try to sort of spin around madly. But yeah, I think it looks quite nice-ish. You know, and it gives you ideas. You know, you think, oh, I could do a nice city like this, get something up and running. And you know, you've got to start thinking of zones for the floor. You might want them not to be able to clump together, and you also might want to think, well, there might be a road network, because this is just like one big massive floor, which, you know, looked okay in the early 90s and stuff on games. You know, a bit later possibly that they didn't really get to town, but you know, you really want some sort of floor system. to make it look like a real proper city. But I don't know whether I'm going to mess around with that. It isn't really the intention. The intention was to just show you first-person shooter movements and just get a little scene to wander around. But I seem to be getting more intrigued with city generation at the moment after messing around with this. It's not the first time I've done this. I did it in Dark Basic a while ago, although not to this extent. I didn't bother with the images and different heights. It was just one image or a random image, random heights and whatnot. It was to test the new plugin I had for distance, field of view and whatnot. I can't think of the term off the top of my head now. I can't even think of the plugin. What was the plugin? It's for doing the backdrop, you know. Occlusion. No, it's not occlusion. I can't remember. Can't think of the term. But yeah, that it allows you to. They're using it in the new first-person shooter creator that's coming out, and it was really good. You could sort of set the level of detail in the background, and you could have huge cities like this. It wouldn't be using half the polygon count, you know, because it's basically just cameras in the background faking the object from your scene, but your scene isn't actually being displayed, and it's sped it up quite a bit in Dark Basic. It's a pity there's nothing like that for AGK. But yeah, I quite like this. It's not, considering it's randomly generated. I think it's done quite a good job. Like I say, you'd probably want to start getting actual objects you load in. But, there's one of those buildings. Look, it looks like an office block, but it's got two stuck in together, and it gives them a nice, interesting shape. And hopefully the collision works just as well in there. It's no problem. Yep, collision works there fine. We've got a sort of oddly shaped building, but it still works. Textures still match, and it works quite well in the main. You might get the odd case where you get something like that merging into a building, which doesn't look right. But like I say, it's a work in progress, and considering it's in it's about 100 lines, less than 100 lines if you took spaces and certain things out, but roughly about 100 lines to get this going without the collision, and even the collision, it's only 170 lines with collision. So you can see AGK and Dark Basic as well was very similar. Very powerful how fast you can get things up and running. I mean, it's unimaginable. You'd never do that in 170 lines in, you know, a lower level language. It just wouldn't be possible. Well, it would, but not quite. Not a proper lower level language anyway. Yeah, the amount of work just to get things moving around would be incredible in comparison. AGK, brilliant little program, and you can do all sorts. Like I say, I've never really done a first-person shooter. I've played around with a style once in Dark Basic when I started doing an elite game for when you're walking around the space stations. But as you can imagine, that got a little bit daunting, and I was doing it with a netbook in mind, and no, it wouldn't run. It just couldn't keep up. It was fine on my PC, but there was no way on the netbook it could handle it. It had shaders and stuff as well, which didn't help. But you know, it's expected these days. So right, yeah. So until next time. Oh, in fact, no. I'll scroll it down slow so you can see it, in case I've not covered anything, or if you haven't seen it properly. Yeah, but pretty simple really, and it looks fairly good. And you can make that into a nice little adventure game. That's what I'll be looking at doing if I carry on with it much. I think I'll do an adventure-ish game. Getting, you know, believable traffic and people is a different thing. That'd be quite difficult. That would, especially the fact I've got no graphics and never have got any graphics abilities in that area. These boxy textured things are about as good as I can get, and obviously those graphics I got were just off the internet. I wouldn't be able to use them particularly. Well, a couple I probably could, because that was off a free texture site, I believe, but I wasn't too fussy where I got everything from. So yeah, scroll down a bit further, you can see that, and that's it. Apart from the Ghost of Collision, which I will cover in another part when I'm totally happy with it. So until next time, I'll catch you later.